What would you do if you suddenly found yourself face to face with one of the richest and most powerful people on the planet, and the smallest question you asked could change everything? Imagine the scene, a small-town diner tucked away in a quiet corner of America, the kind of place where everybody knows your name and the menu hasn't changed in decades. Sarah, a waitress in her late 20s, wipes down the counter one slow afternoon, thinking about the mounting bills at home and the worry that never leaves her heart. She's a single mom working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and put food on the table for her little boy, Jason. Her life is a whirlwind of exhaustion, hope, and fear, tangled up like the knots in her hair. She has dreams, sure, but they feel like distant stars, beautiful but unreachable. Today feels no different until the door swings open and in walks Elon Musk, the billionaire tech genius, entrepreneur, and one of the most talked about people in the world. His presence immediately changes the energy in the room. The chatter hushes, eyes widen, and Sarah feels a rush of nerves mixed with disbelief. Elon chooses a booth near the window, sitting alone, quietly scanning the simple menu with the same intensity he likely brings to rockets and electric cars. Sarah is assigned to his table, and as she approaches, her heart pounds louder than the clinking of dishes around her. She places the order, black coffee, cheeseburger, fries, and tries to steady her voice. In these few moments, Sarah is caught between awe and desperation. She knows who he is, the man behind Tesla, SpaceX, and dreams of colonizing Mars. But what she doesn't know is how this encounter will change her life. As she serves Elon, she catches glimpses of a man who seems less like a celebrity and more like a stranger with a weight on his shoulders. When the meal ends, Sarah's courage swells. With trembling hands, she asks him for a $50 tip, a small amount for him, a lifeline for her. She explains softly how that money could help pay overdue bills, cover Jason's school needs, and maybe buy a warm coat for winter. The diner falls silent as Elon's eyes meet hers. His response is not what Sarah or anyone else in the room expects. Instead of handing over cash or dismissing her request, he challenges her. He asks what she would do with the chance if given more than just money. Would she work harder? Dream bigger? Fight through the hard times? Sarah, taken aback but intrigued, finds herself agreeing to a challenge she never imagined. This moment is no longer about a tip, it's about possibility. What if this billionaire sees more than just a struggling waitress? What if he sees a fighter, a dreamer, someone worth investing in? The diner, once quiet, now buzzes with excitement and disbelief. People whisper about what this could mean, about how a simple $50 tip request turned into something much bigger. Sarah's mind races with questions, doubts, and a flicker of hope she thought was long gone. This story is not just about Sarah and Elon, it's about all of us who face impossible odds and cling to the smallest sparks of hope. What pushes you forward when life feels overwhelming? What keeps you moving when the world seems to say no? As Sarah looks out the diner window at the fading light, she realizes this moment might be the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for everyone watching and believing in the power of unexpected kindness and courage. So, hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Tell us what pushes you forward when things get tough. Because this story might just spark a new beginning for you too. Stay with me as we dive deeper into Sarah's past, the hardships that shaped her, and the surprising journey that started with one bold question and a shocking response from one of the world's most unlikely heroes. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Sarah's story didn't start in a diner, nor did it start with Elon Musk walking through the door. It started years earlier, in a small town much like this one, where the streets were lined with cracked sidewalks and the smell of fresh cut grass mixed with the distant hum of trains passing by. Sarah grew up in a modest home with her father, a man who worked 2 jobs to keep the family afloat, and her mother, who left when Sarah was just a child. Her earliest memories were filled with the warmth of her father's rough hands and his quiet determination to protect her. But when Sarah was just 13, that protection shattered. Her father was diagnosed with a rare heart condition and passed away within months, leaving her world fractured and her dreams fragile. Losing him was like losing the ground beneath her feet. She remembers standing by his hospital bed, clutching his hand, begging him not to leave. That moment, seared into her memory, became the foundation of everything she is today, strong but vulnerable, hopeful but cautious. After her father's death, Sarah had to grow up fast. Her teenage years were a blur of foster homes and part-time jobs, trying to keep herself together while the world seemed to fall apart around her. School became a distant memory as survival took priority. But even in the darkest times, she held on to one thing, her son Jason. When she found out she was pregnant at 19, it felt like both a challenge and a miracle. Jason was her second chance, her reason to fight every day. She remembers the first time she held him, a tiny bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket, and how all the pain seemed to fade away for just a moment. Raising Jason as a single mom has been the hardest thing Sarah has ever done. She juggled night shifts at the diner and day classes at a community college, sacrificing sleep and social life, all so she could give him a better life than the one she had. But every step forward felt like climbing a mountain. The bills piled up, the landlord's calls grew more frequent, and the weight of loneliness pressed down on her like a stone. Still, Sarah never let herself give up. She dreamed of owning a small business one day, maybe a cafe or a bookstore, a place where people could feel safe and welcome. But for now, those dreams seemed distant, caught between exhaustion and the harsh reality of rent-due dates. Her relationship with Jason was the light in the storm. He was bright and curious, asking questions about the stars and space, fascinated by rockets and astronauts. Sarah encouraged his curiosity, telling him stories she made up about flying to the moon and exploring new worlds. Those moments, simple and magical, reminded her why she fought so hard every day. But not everything was easy at home. Sarah's small apartment was cramped, and sometimes the stress got to both of them. She worried about Jason feeling lonely or missing out on a normal childhood. Friends drifted away as her life became consumed by work and worry. The diner became more than a job, it was her lifeline. The people who came in every day, the regulars who smiled and chatted, gave her a sense of belonging. But it was also a reminder of how far she still had to go. Despite everything, Sarah kept a stubborn hope alive. She believed that life wasn't just about surviving but about finding moments of joy, love, and meaning. The loss of her father, the challenges of single motherhood, and the daily grind shaped her into someone who refused to be broken. She was determined to write a different story for herself and Jason. When Elon Musk walked into the diner that afternoon, Sarah was caught off guard, not just because of who he was, but because it felt like fate had handed her a rare chance. She wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was the moment her life could change. Yet, beneath that hope was the fear of rejection, of being invisible to someone with a world so different from hers. She wasn't sure if she was brave enough to ask for help, but Jason's face in her mind gave her strength. This chapter of Sarah's life is one of quiet resilience, where every small victory counts, and every setback teaches a lesson. It's a story of love that fuels perseverance, and pain that breeds strength. As the diner's neon sign flickers outside and the evening settles in, Sarah carries the weight of her past with her, but also a flicker of something new, a chance she never dreamed of, sparked by a simple question and the response of a man who could change everything. Sarah's life revolved around the diner, the small, aging place with its checkered floor, faded booths, and flickering neon sign that hummed quietly outside. It was the kind of diner where the coffee was strong, the pie was homemade, and the conversations were honest and rough around the edges. She knew most of the regulars by name, their stories etched into the cracks of the worn tables. There was Joe, the retired mechanic who came in every morning at 6, ordering black coffee and a slice of apple pie. There was Linda, a waitress who had worked there for nearly 20 years and treated Sarah like a younger sister. The diner was a patchwork of community, hope, and struggle, just like Sarah's own life. Working here gave her a sense of purpose, even on the days when her feet ached and her mind felt heavy. The hustle of serving orders, refilling cups, and managing the chaos was a distraction from the bills piling up at home. But the diner was also a reminder of how stuck she felt. Most of the customers were just passing through or holding on to their own dreams, trying to make it from one paycheck to the next. Sarah often overheard snippets of conversations about layoffs, medical bills, or missed opportunities. It was a small town, and news traveled fast, but nobody seemed to have answers for how to escape the cycle of hardship. Sarah's co-workers were a mix of tough veterans and hopeful newbies. Linda was the anchor, sharing advice and stories about the town's history, while younger waitresses like Megan often dreamed out loud about moving to the city and starting fresh. Sarah admired their courage but felt trapped in a web of responsibilities and fears. She worked double shifts, sometimes late into the night, barely finding time to breathe, let alone plan for the future. Her interactions with customers were often quick and transactional, but every now and then someone would notice the tired smile and ask how she was doing. Those moments of genuine kindness were precious. Sarah's days blended together in a cycle of routine and exhaustion until Elon Musk walked into the diner, breaking the pattern with an unexpected burst of possibility. Elon's visit was a quiet event at first. He didn't bring cameras or entourages. He sat alone, ordering a simple meal, and kept to himself in the corner. But the staff buzzed with whispers and glances, their curiosity piqued. Sarah felt the weight of his presence every time she passed his table. She tried to keep her cool, but inside, she was a storm of nerves and questions. Why was he here? What did he want? Could this be the break she had been waiting for? The tension in the diner grew, not just from the celebrity presence, but from Sarah's own internal conflict. She knew she needed to ask for help, but what if she was seen as just another struggling waitress? What if she embarrassed herself or ruined the moment? The fear of rejection almost silenced her, but then she remembered Jason, and her determination grew. The day went on with small moments of hope. Elon's polite nods, the way he seemed interested when Sarah talked about the town, and the glimmers of humanity behind his intense gaze. Sarah's co-workers encouraged her, reminding her that sometimes you have to take risks to get what you want. When the meal ended and the bill came, Sarah made a decision. She approached Elon's table, heart pounding, and asked for a $50 tip, explaining how it would help her and her son get through the next few weeks. The diner went quiet again, all eyes on them. Elon's response was unexpected. He didn't simply hand over money or brush her off. Instead, he posed a challenge that shifted the entire dynamic. He asked if she was willing to work for more than just money, if she had a vision for her life beyond the diner, if she could fight through setbacks and doubts. Sarah was stunned but intrigued. This wasn't charity, it was a call to action. The challenge ignited a fire inside her, a mix of fear and excitement she hadn't felt in years. The diner buzzed with renewed energy as patrons whispered about what might happen next. Sarah's journey was no longer about surviving but about transforming. But change never comes easy. As Sarah left work that night, exhaustion heavy in her bones, she knew the real battle was just beginning. Balancing her job, her son, and this new opportunity would test everything she had. Old doubts crept in, and the comfort of routine called her back. She wondered if she was ready to step into a world so different from her own, a world of entrepreneurs, mentors, and big dreams. The diner's neon sign flickered as she walked past, a silent reminder of where she came from and the uncertain path ahead. The tension between the familiar and the unknown, between fear and hope, hung in the air. Like a storm waiting to break. But Sarah was determined. For Jason, for herself, for a future where she could finally breathe easy. This chapter of her life, marked by the small-town diner and a chance encounter, was the beginning of something bigger, a story of grit, courage, and the power of daring to ask for more. Sarah woke the next morning to the cold bite of early spring air sneaking through the cracked window of her small apartment. The faded walls and creaky floorboards were reminders of everything she had fought to keep in place, and as sunlight spilled over the threadbare curtains, she felt the weight of yesterday's conversation with Elon Musk settle in her chest. She had spent the night turning over his words, the challenge he'd issued. Were you willing to work for more than just money? Could you fight through setbacks and doubts? That challenge wasn't just a question, it was a door opening into a world she barely knew existed, a world full of unknowns but also possibilities. Jason was still asleep, curled up beneath his blanket, and Sarah watched him for a moment, her heart swelling with love and responsibility. Whatever came next, it was for him. That day, instead of going straight to the diner, Sarah visited the local library, a place she hadn't set foot in for years. She needed to learn, to prepare, to prove to herself that she could rise to the challenge. She pulled out books on business, entrepreneurship, and personal finance, her fingers trembling as she flipped pages filled with words that sounded both intimidating and thrilling. As the hours passed, Sarah felt a spark rekindling inside her, a hunger for knowledge and a dream she'd tucked away beneath years of survival. She realized the diner had been her safety net, but safety sometimes meant stagnation. Elon's challenge was a call to leap. Over the next few days, Sarah juggled the diner shifts with late-night study sessions, absorbing everything she could. She started drafting ideas for a small business, a cozy cafe with a focus on community and comfort, a place where people could find warmth not just in coffee but in connection. Yet, even as hope grew, the obstacles loomed large. Bills still demanded attention, her landlord's calls persisted, and Jason needed new shoes for school. The pressure was relentless, and the fear of failure gnawed at her resolve. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's presence in town had stirred whispers and speculation. Some saw his visit as a publicity stunt, others believed there was more beneath the surface. Sarah, however, kept their interaction private, unsure how to explain this strange, sudden intersection of her life with someone so far removed from her world. Then came the unexpected phone call. Elon wanted to meet again, to hear more about her plans and offer guidance. Sarah's heart pounded as she prepared for the meeting. The place was an old, renovated warehouse turned co-working space, a sharp contrast to the diner's worn booths and chipped counters. Inside, the air buzzed with energy, people typing on laptops, brainstorming in groups, chasing their own dreams. Elon was already there when Sarah arrived, seated at a sleek table with a stack of papers and a laptop. His demeanor was focused but inviting, his curiosity genuine. He asked questions about her background, her challenges, and her vision for the future. Sarah found herself opening up, sharing not just her ideas but the fears and hopes that fueled them. It was terrifying and exhilarating. The conversation stretched for hours, a roller coaster of doubts and encouragement. Elon challenged her assumptions, pushed her to think bigger, and shared insights from his own journey, failures and triumphs alike. Sarah realized this was no longer about a tip or a moment of luck, it was about transformation and commitment. But as the meeting ended, a new challenge emerged. A potential investor had heard about Sarah's story and was interested in backing her idea, but with strings attached. The investor wanted control over the business, demanding changes that clashed with Sarah's vision of community and warmth. Sarah faced a crossroads: accept the offer and secure funding but risk losing the heart of her dream, or hold on to her values and find another way, risking everything. That night, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, Jason asleep nearby, and wrestled with the decision. The pressure felt crushing, the stakes higher than ever. But deep down, she knew that surrendering her dream to compromise would be a loss she couldn't afford. The journey ahead would be harder than she imagined, full of twists and turns, setbacks and small victories. Elon's challenge echoed in her mind, a call to fight through setbacks and doubts. Sarah took a deep breath and made her choice. She would hold on to her vision, no matter the cost. This was her chance to rewrite her story, not just as a waitress asking for a tip, but as a woman claiming her future. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with hardship, but Sarah was ready to walk it, step by step, with hope as her guide. The weeks that followed were some of the most intense Sarah had ever faced. The initial rush of excitement from her meeting with Elon Musk slowly gave way to a relentless series of challenges that tested her in ways she never expected. Every day felt like a battle between hope and doubt, her dreams on one side and the weight of reality on the other. The investor's offer still hung in the air, a tempting but dangerous lifeline. Sarah had chosen to hold firm to her vision, refusing to compromise the warmth and community she wanted her cafe to embody. But that choice came with consequences. Funding was scarce, and the pressure to make things work mounted. She found herself juggling the diner shifts, late nights planning, and managing her responsibilities as a single mom. Jason noticed the changes too. He saw his mother tired but determined, and sometimes, he caught the flicker of frustration in her eyes. One evening, after putting Jason to bed, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of notes, business plans, and a flickering laptop screen. The silence was broken only by the occasional hum of traffic outside and the ticking of the old clock on the wall. She felt a deep exhaustion settle into her bones, the kind that seeped into every thought and muscle. Doubt crept in. Was she really cut out for this? Could she truly break free from the cycle that had defined her life? The question gnawed at her relentlessly. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Elon Musk, reaching out again, not as a distant billionaire, but as a mentor invested in her potential. He offered not just advice, but connections, people who could help with marketing, legal issues, and business development. It felt like a lifeline thrown across an ocean of uncertainty. But with the help came new challenges. The scrutiny increased. Sarah found herself under a spotlight she had never sought. Every decision, every misstep, was magnified. The pressure to succeed was overwhelming, and some days, it felt like the entire world was watching her fail. Then, one night, a major setback struck. A key supplier backed out at the last minute, threatening the opening of her cafe. The panic set in fast. Without those materials, she couldn't create the warm, inviting space she had dreamed of. Sarah felt the crushing weight of failure closing in. She sat on the floor of her apartment, tears streaming down her face, feeling utterly defeated. But just as the despair threatened to swallow her whole, a message popped up on her phone, an encouraging note from Elon. He reminded her that failure was part of every great journey, that the path was rarely straight, and that her courage was what truly mattered. That message reignited the spark within her. Sarah wiped her tears and stood up, determination replacing doubt. She called friends, made new connections, and found an alternative supplier. More expensive but reliable. The setback became a lesson, a reminder that resilience was her greatest strength. The day the cafe finally opened was a whirlwind of emotions. Nervousness, excitement, and exhaustion swirled inside Sarah as she welcomed the first customers. The space was everything she had dreamed of: cozy booths, soft lighting, walls lined with local art, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Jason was there, proud and beaming, his eyes wide with wonder. For a moment, all the hardship felt worth it. But the emotional climax came later that night when Sarah received an unexpected visitor, her mother. The woman who had left when Sarah was a child, who had been absent through all the struggles, was standing at the door, eyes filled with tears and regret. The confrontation was raw and painful. Years of hurt and unanswered questions flooded the room. Sarah's heart ached, torn between anger and a deep longing for connection. The conversation forced her to confront the wounds she had buried, to face the past she had tried to forget. But in that painful reckoning, something shifted. Forgiveness, not for her mother's sake alone, but for Sarah's own peace, began to take root. It was a moment of profound emotional release and healing. As the night ended, Sarah realized that her journey was not just about building a business but about reclaiming her own story, her past, her present, and her future. The lessons of love, sacrifice, and resilience intertwined, guiding her forward. Elon's challenge had sparked a transformation that went beyond money or fame. It had awakened a fire within her that no obstacle could extinguish. Sarah's story had reached its emotional peak, filled with heartbreak and hope, failure and triumph. The path ahead was still uncertain, but she faced it with new strength and clarity. She understood now that true success wasn't just about achieving dreams. It was about embracing the journey, with all its pain and beauty, and finding the courage to keep moving forward no matter what. The morning after her mother's unexpected visit, Sarah woke with a strange mixture of peace and uncertainty swirling inside her. The pain of years past hadn't vanished, but something had shifted, a quiet understanding that life's wounds could be healed, if not forgotten. As sunlight poured through the small kitchen window, casting golden streaks over the cluttered counters and faded wallpaper, Sarah sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the moment. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of calm she hadn't known was possible. The cafe was humming softly with the steady flow of customers, their voices and laughter weaving a comforting soundtrack around her. It wasn't just a business anymore, it was a sanctuary, a place built on hope, hard work, and the dreams of a woman who refused to be broken. Jason, now fully immersed in his school projects and life's small adventures, was growing up fast, his curiosity as vibrant as ever. Sarah made sure to carve out time for him, knowing their bond was the foundation of everything she was building. Forgiveness, she realized, was a gift she was giving herself as much as her mother. It was a release from the burden of past hurts, a way to move forward with a lighter heart. The path hadn't been easy. There had been nights filled with tears and doubt, moments when giving up seemed like the only option. But through it all, love had been her guiding star. The love for her son, for her dreams, and for herself. Elon's unexpected kindness and challenge had been a catalyst, but the real change came from within. Sarah reflected on the lessons she had learned, that resilience isn't about never falling, but about rising every time you do, that dreams require more than desire, they demand courage, sacrifice, and sometimes painful choices, and that life surprises, even the painful ones, can open doors to new beginnings. Her story was no longer just about struggle, it was about growth and the transformative power of hope. The cafe began to thrive, becoming a beacon for the community, a place where stories were shared, friendships formed, and dreams nurtured. Sarah found joy in the simple moments, a customer's smile, Jason's laughter, the first bloom of flowers outside in spring. She understood now that success wasn't just measured in dollars or fame, but in the love and meaning woven through each day. One afternoon, as she wiped down the counter, a regular customer asked her what kept her going through the toughest times. Sarah smiled, her eyes reflecting the depth of her journey, and said, "It's love, the kind that never lets you give up, no matter how hard things get. For me, it's my son, but it could be anything or anyone that makes you believe there's something better waiting." She thought back to the moment she had asked Elon Musk for a tip, a simple act born out of desperation, and how that had blossomed into a life-changing journey. The lesson was clear: sometimes, courage starts with a small step, a single question asked in hope. Sarah's story was a testament to the power of daring to dream and the strength found in vulnerability. As she looked out at the town she loved, she knew that life was full of surprises, but love would always lead the way. Her journey had taught her that no matter where you start, no matter the hardships faced, there's always a chance for a new beginning. With gratitude in her heart and a future bright with possibility, Sarah embraced her life, imperfect, challenging, but rich with meaning and love. After the emotional release with her mother, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose, but the world outside her cafe was still full of challenges that refused to fade away overnight. The small town was struggling economically, and every day brought news of businesses closing or families leaving in search of better opportunities. Sarah's cafe, while a beacon of hope, was not immune to these pressures. She had to find ways to keep the doors open, to balance books that sometimes felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. Despite the growing community support, the financial strain was constant. Vendors raised prices, unexpected repairs came up, and the occasional slow day in the cafe gnawed at her confidence. But Sarah was no stranger to hard work and sacrifice. She poured herself into every task, learning about marketing, managing employees, and even taking on late-night deliveries herself. She refused to let setbacks define her story. Her relationship with Elon Musk remained a source of unexpected mentorship. He checked in regularly, offering advice but never imposing. He challenged her to think bigger. Not just about her cafe but about how she could influence the town and inspire others. "You have a story that matters," he told her once during a call, "and sometimes the greatest impact comes from lifting those around you." Those words stuck with Sarah. She began organizing community events at the cafe, open mic nights, charity fundraisers, workshops for young entrepreneurs. The cafe transformed from just a business to a hub of connection and creativity. Jason thrived in this environment too, making friends and finding role models among the community members. Sarah watched him grow with pride, knowing her struggles had paved the way for his opportunities. But with growth came new tensions. Some locals viewed her rising success with suspicion, whispering that she was changing the town too quickly or forgetting where she came from. Sarah felt the sting of judgment but refused to let it derail her. She understood that change was often uncomfortable, especially in places clinging to the past. At home, the balance between motherhood and ambition was a delicate dance. Jason sometimes felt neglected in the whirlwind of her commitments, and Sarah wrestled with guilt she couldn't shake. Yet, she found strength in their honest conversations, teaching Jason that pursuing dreams didn't mean abandoning family, it meant fighting for a better future together. One evening, as Sarah locked up the cafe, a familiar face appeared, Linda, her longtime co-worker from the diner, now a close friend and supporter. Linda smiled warmly, eyes bright with excitement. "Sarah, you're changing things around here. People are starting to believe in themselves because of you." That encouragement meant more than Sarah could say. It was a reminder that her journey was not solitary but woven into the lives of many. Still, Sarah's nights were often restless, her mind racing with worries and plans. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but the fire within her burned stronger than ever. She understood now that resilience wasn't about never feeling fear or doubt, it was about choosing hope in spite of them. The story that had begun with a simple, desperate request for a tip had evolved into a powerful testament to courage and transformation. As the seasons changed, Sarah's cafe became a symbol of possibility, not just for her, but for the town and everyone who walked through its doors. She knew the road ahead would have more twists and trials, but she was ready. For Jason, for her community, and for herself, Sarah would keep moving forward, one step at a time, with hope lighting the way. The cafe's success was a beacon in the town, but Sarah knew the world beyond wasn't waiting for her to settle comfortably. New opportunities and challenges emerged like shifting tides. One chilly morning, an email arrived that caught her completely off guard, an invitation to participate in a regional small business competition. The prize was significant funding and media exposure, a chance to catapult her dream into a larger reality. The catch was daunting: she would have to prepare a pitch, present before a panel of judges, and compete against other entrepreneurs with far more polished presentations and resources. Sarah's heart raced. This was everything she wanted and feared. Could she stand in front of strangers, tell her story, and convince them to believe in her vision? For days she wrestled with self-doubt and the logistics of preparing her pitch. Jason noticed her stress and offered simple but heartfelt encouragement. "Mom, you're already amazing. Just be yourself." His words, innocent and sincere, became a mantra she repeated in moments of uncertainty. Late nights became filled with writing, rehearsing, and refining. She reached out to Elon, who connected her with a communications coach and gave pointers on how to tell her story authentically and powerfully. The coach pushed Sarah to dig deep, not just to talk about the cafe but to share the journey, the struggles, and the hopes that fueled her fight. Sarah practiced in front of friends and neighbors who gathered at the cafe, offering support and honest feedback. With each rehearsal, her confidence grew, and the story she told became more than a business plan, it became a testament to resilience, community, and love. The day of the competition arrived faster than she anticipated. The auditorium was filled with nervous energy, bright lights, and polished entrepreneurs from cities larger and more affluent than her own. Standing backstage, Sarah's hands trembled as she listened to others' pitches. When it was her turn, she stepped onto the stage, the weight of expectation pressing on her. But as she looked out at the faces in the crowd, she thought of Jason, of the cafe filled with warmth and hope, and the lessons she'd learned from Elon and her own journey. Taking a deep breath, Sarah began to speak, not just with facts and figures but with heart. She told her story. The waitress who dared to ask for a tip, the single mother fighting for a better life, the woman who believed in community and second chances. Her voice wavered at times but grew stronger with every word. The audience was silent, captivated by the raw honesty and passion. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Sarah felt a rush of relief and pride unlike anything before. The judges asked questions, and she answered with clarity and conviction, owning her story and her vision. In the days that followed, Sarah waited anxiously for the results. When the announcement finally came, she had won second place, enough funding to expand the cafe and boost marketing but not everything she hoped for. Mixed emotions flooded her. The recognition was validating, but the gap between her dream and reality remained. Yet, Sarah embraced the win as another step forward, another chance to grow. Back home, the cafe buzzed with excitement and support. Friends and neighbors celebrated with her, their belief fueling her resolve. But the win also attracted new attention, some positive, some critical. A local business owner approached Sarah with a proposal to partner, promising growth but demanding a share of control. Sarah faced another crossroads. Would she risk her independence for rapid expansion, or hold on to the values that defined her? The decision weighed heavily, but Sarah remembered the hard lessons of compromise and conviction. She declined the partnership, choosing to grow slowly but authentically. That night, after closing the cafe, Sarah sat with Jason, sharing the day's events. He looked up at her with admiration and said, "Mom, you're teaching me that sometimes winning isn't about the prize but about how you play the game." Sarah smiled, her heart full. The journey was far from over, but with every challenge and victory, she grew stronger. Her story, once born from a simple request for a tip, was now a powerful narrative of hope, resilience, and unwavering love. And as the stars twinkled outside their window, Sarah knew that no matter what the future held, she would face it with courage, one step at a time. The days following the competition brought a new wave of energy to Sarah's cafe and life, but they also ushered in unexpected challenges. The town's attention on her business had grown, and with it, the scrutiny. Not everyone was pleased with the spotlight shining on a small-town waitress turned entrepreneur. Whispered criticisms began to ripple through the community. Some questioned her motives, suggesting she was changing the town too quickly or forgetting the people who had been there all along. Sarah felt the sting of these doubts, the heavy weight of judgment she hadn't anticipated. But she also discovered allies, people who believed in her vision and stood firmly by her side. Among them was Marcus, a local journalist who had followed her story from the beginning. Marcus offered to write a feature on the cafe's impact on the community, highlighting not just the business but the human stories woven into it. Sarah was cautious but hopeful. When the article was published, it was a heartfelt portrayal of struggle and triumph, resonating with many and softening some of the harsher voices. Yet, the increased visibility brought its own pressures. A rival business owner, jealous of Sarah's growing success, began to spread rumors, attempting to undermine her reputation. Sarah faced a new kind of battle, not just financial or logistical, but one of trust and integrity. She knew that reacting with anger or retaliation would only escalate tensions. Instead, she chose transparency and kindness, continuing to serve her customers with genuine warmth and dedication. Behind the scenes, she leaned heavily on her friends and community, drawing strength from their support. At home, the balance between work and family remained a constant challenge. Jason was entering a new phase of adolescence, with its own complexities and emotions. Sarah did her best to be present, attending school events and carving out quiet moments together, but exhaustion sometimes blurred the lines. One night, after a particularly long day, Jason confronted her with the honest words every parent fears to hear, "Mom, I feel like I'm competing with your work for your attention." The admission hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She realized that in her pursuit of success, she had unintentionally created distance. Determined to make things right, Sarah committed to finding better balance, learning that love required not just sacrifice but also presence. Meanwhile, the cafe continued to grow as a community hub. Sarah's vision of a welcoming space where people felt valued and connected was coming to life. She hosted local artists, supported youth programs, and partnered with charities. Each initiative deepened the cafe's roots in the town and brought a renewed sense of purpose to her work. As the seasons changed, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the desperation of that first tip request, the unexpected mentorship of Elon Musk, the personal and professional trials that had tested her spirit. She understood now that success was not a destination but an ongoing process of growth, learning, and resilience. The challenges had not disappeared, but she faced them with newfound strength and clarity. One evening, as she closed the cafe, Marcus stopped by with a question that surprised her. "Sarah, what's next for you? Where do you want to go from here?" The question sparked a long conversation about dreams, fears, and the future. Sarah admitted she didn't have all the answers but was excited to keep pushing forward, one step at a time, with hope guiding her. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the closing cafe, Sarah felt a deep gratitude. Her story was far from over, filled with twists and turns, but it was hers, raw, real, and full of heart. And she was ready for whatever came next. Spring arrived with a burst of color and energy, breathing new life into the town and Sarah's cafe. The change in seasons mirrored the changes within Sarah herself. After months of struggle, reflection, and growth, she felt stronger, more grounded, and ready to embrace whatever came next. The cafe had become more than just a business, it was a symbol of resilience and hope, a place where people found not only coffee but community. Sarah's connection to her customers deepened every day. She remembered faces and stories, celebrated milestones, and offered a listening ear to those who needed it most. It was in these small, often overlooked moments that she found the true meaning of success. But spring also brought unexpected news. One morning, Sarah received a letter from the city's planning commission announcing a proposed development project that threatened to change the neighborhood, possibly forcing several small businesses, including hers, to relocate or close. The news hit her like a cold wave. The cafe, the community events, and the sanctuary she had built suddenly felt fragile and uncertain. Sarah's mind raced with questions. How could she fight this? What could she do to protect the place that had become so much more than a storefront? The town was divided. Some saw the development as progress and opportunity, while others feared losing the character and soul of their home. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her. This wasn't just about her cafe anymore, it was about preserving a community's identity and future. Determined to act, Sarah rallied support. She organized meetings, spoke with neighbors and local leaders, and gathered signatures for a petition to halt or alter the project. The effort brought the community closer together, reigniting a shared passion for their town and its future. Yet, the fight was exhausting and fraught with setbacks. City officials seemed indifferent, and corporate interests loomed large. Sarah faced moments of doubt and frustration but refused to give up. Her son Jason became an unexpected source of inspiration. Watching his mother fight so fiercely taught him about courage and standing up for what matters. One afternoon, he handed her a handmade sign that read, "Our town, our home." It was simple but powerful, a reminder of why the struggle was worth it. Amid the battle, Sarah found moments of grace. The cafe hosted fundraisers and community dinners, places where neighbors shared stories, dreams, and hope. These gatherings renewed Sarah's faith in the strength of human connection. Elon Musk checked in during this period, offering advice on leveraging social media and connecting with influential voices who could support the cause. His involvement brought increased attention and pressure on the developers. Slowly, the tide began to shift. The city council agreed to reconsider the project, promising a public hearing and more community input. Sarah stood before a crowd at the hearing, her voice steady but filled with passion as she spoke not only for her business but for the heart of the town. Her words echoed the hopes and fears of everyone present. The hearing was a turning point. The council voted to delay the project and explore alternatives that would preserve the neighborhood's character while allowing for thoughtful growth. The victory was bittersweet, only a pause, not a final solution, but it was a testament to the power of community and persistence. That evening, as Sarah locked up the cafe, she felt a deep exhaustion but also an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She looked out at the town she loved, knowing the fight wasn't over, but proud of the stand they had taken together. Her journey had taught her that dreams were fragile but worth defending and that sometimes the greatest battles were fought not just for personal success but for the soul of a community. As spring gave way to summer, Sarah continued to nurture her cafe and her relationships, embracing the lessons of resilience, hope, and love that had carried her this far. She knew the road ahead would bring new challenges, but she faced them with an open heart and unwavering courage, ready to write the next chapter of her story, one filled with strength, connection, and endless possibility. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Summer had settled into the town like a warm embrace, bringing longer days and a bustle of activity that filled the streets and the cafe with a renewed energy. For Sarah, this season marked not just a shift in weather but a pivotal moment in her personal and professional life. The battle over the development project had paused, but the future still held uncertainties. Amidst it all, Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here, the desperate hope behind that simple $50 tip request, the mentorship from Elon Musk, and the hard-won lessons in resilience and love. One morning, as the sun filtered through the cafe's windows, Sarah was greeted by an unexpected visitor, a young woman named Emily, who had recently moved to town. Emily was bright, ambitious, and full of ideas, eager to start her own small business but unsure of where to begin. Sarah saw a bit of herself in Emily's uncertainty and hope. Over coffee, they shared stories of struggle and dreams. Sarah offered guidance, encouragement, and a listening ear, realizing how much she had to offer beyond running a cafe. This connection sparked a new passion in Sarah, to mentor others, to help turn dreams into reality. The cafe became a hub for aspiring entrepreneurs, hosting workshops and networking events. Sarah's influence grew, not through grandeur or fame, but through genuine connections and shared purpose. Yet, growth brought its own challenges. Balancing mentorship, business, and motherhood stretched Sarah thin. Jason was entering a critical phase in school, needing support and attention even as Sarah's commitments multiplied. There were days when exhaustion clouded her vision, and self-doubt crept in like an unwelcome shadow. But Sarah found strength in community, the friends, customers, and mentors who lifted her up when she faltered. Elon's occasional messages of encouragement reminded her that even the most daunting paths could lead to incredible destinations. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, Sarah found herself alone in the cafe, reflecting on how far she had come. The hardships, the victories, the moments of doubt and hope, they all wove together into a tapestry that was uniquely hers. She realized that success wasn't about perfection or never failing, but about persistence and heart. Around her, the cafe buzzed softly with life, the clink of cups, murmurs of conversation, and the comforting scent of fresh coffee. It was more than a place, it was a testament to human connection and courage. The next weeks brought exciting news. Sarah was invited to speak at a regional conference on small business and community development. The invitation was an honor but also intimidating. Standing before a large audience, sharing her story, and inspiring others was a new kind of challenge. Yet, Sarah embraced it, seeing it as another step in her evolving journey. She prepared carefully, drawing on every lesson learned, from the shaky beginnings to the powerful moments of triumph. When the day arrived, Sarah's voice carried strength and authenticity as she spoke about resilience, love, and the power of community. Her story resonated deeply, sparking conversations and connections that extended far beyond the conference hall. Returning home, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. She understood that her journey was not just about her cafe or her town but about the ripple effect one person's courage could have on the world. As summer stretched on, Sarah continued to balance the many roles she played, with grace and determination. She knew challenges lay ahead, but she faced them with open eyes and an open heart, ready to embrace whatever came next. Her story, born from a simple plea for a $50 tip, had grown into a powerful testament to hope, courage, and the transformative power of love. As July settled in with its humid afternoons and slow-burning sunsets, Sarah began to feel a new kind of weight pressing down on her. It wasn't the stress of running the cafe or the demands of mentoring others, it was the quiet, persistent ache of having gone so far without stopping to truly breathe. Everything in her life had been moving forward so fast for so long, she hadn't allowed herself a moment to pause and simply exist. Her days blurred together with routines, checking inventory, brewing coffee, replying to emails, helping Jason with schoolwork, collapsing into bed, and doing it all over again. But inside, she was beginning to feel a hollowness that no amount of caffeine or accomplishment could fill. One evening, after closing up, she sat alone in one of the booths with the lights dimmed low and the windows reflecting the warm orange hue of the setting sun. It had been a busy day, but even in the success of it, Sarah felt disconnected, like she was present in body but elsewhere in mind. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts raced through all the changes of the past year, the people who had come into her life, and those who had quietly slipped away. She missed the simple conversations she used to have with her friends before everything became about planning, performance, and survival. She missed herself, who she used to be before she had to become everything to everyone. The next morning, she took a rare break. She handed the cafe over to Linda and a few trusted employees and took Jason for a walk through the local botanical gardens. It was quiet there, peaceful, filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the gentle buzz of bees. Jason walked beside her, his curiosity undiminished. "Mom, do you think you'll ever stop running the cafe?" he asked suddenly, catching her off guard. She paused, considering the question. "Maybe one day," she answered truthfully. "Not because I want to leave it behind, but because I want to live more, not just work all the time." Jason nodded, thoughtful. "I think it would be cool if we took a trip somewhere. Just you and me." That idea stuck with her. Later that week, she opened a savings jar labeled Adventure Fund, and she and Jason agreed to add to it each week. It was a small step, but it represented something big, a commitment to themselves. Meanwhile, Sarah received news from Elon Musk's team. A documentary filmmaker, inspired by the viral story of her journey, wanted to feature her in a series about ordinary people who had extraordinary impact. Sarah was hesitant. She didn't see herself as extraordinary. She was just trying to survive and help others along the way. But after thinking it through, and talking with Jason, she agreed. If her story could inspire others the way Elon's challenge had inspired her, maybe it was worth sharing on a bigger stage. The film crew arrived weeks later, respectful but eager to dive into her world. Cameras captured the daily rhythms of the cafe, the community events, her interactions with Jason, and quiet moments of reflection. At first, Sarah felt awkward and overly self-aware. But over time, she relaxed, speaking honestly about her struggles, her hopes, and the parts of her story she hadn't shared publicly, like the loneliness she sometimes felt, the guilt of not always being present for Jason, and the fear that success might someday isolate her more than it lifted her. These moments, raw and unscripted, became the soul of the documentary. One evening, the crew filmed a community night at the cafe. The place was packed, local musicians performed, families gathered, laughter filled the air, and Sarah moved through it all like the heart of something deeply alive. Watching from the doorway, Elon Musk stood quietly with a rare smile. He had flown in unexpectedly, wanting to witness what had come of the woman who once asked for a $50 tip and ended up building something far bigger than either of them had imagined. They spoke briefly, stepping outside under the stars. Elon complimented her growth, her leadership, and her courage. "You've done more than open a cafe," he said. "You've built a movement, without even trying to." Sarah chuckled, humbled. "I didn't mean to. I just didn't want to give up." "That's usually how it starts," he replied. One person refusing to quit. They didn't talk about money, opportunities, or future ventures. They talked about life, balance, and the strange power of second chances. As he left, Elon gave her a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a check, not for expansion, but for the adventure fund. "Take that trip," the note read. "The world can wait a little while." That night, Sarah cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming gratitude of feeling seen, not just for what she did, but for who she was. She tucked the envelope away and hugged Jason tighter than ever. In the quiet that followed, she knew that her journey wasn't just about building something lasting, it was about remembering to live within it. To find joy in the cracks, to breathe through the chaos, and to take the time to dream, even after dreams had come true. The days following Elon's visit and his unexpected gift unfolded with a strange calm, like the quiet before a life shift she hadn't seen coming. Sarah tucked the check into her desk drawer, not rushing to spend it. Instead, she carried it in her thoughts like a secret reminder that the world was bigger than her cafe and her daily schedule. That there were still miles of open road waiting, not just in geography, but in life. But as peaceful as the surface seemed, the current beneath it pulled in conflicting directions. The documentary crew had finished filming, and now the weight of what she had shared, raw truths, vulnerable moments, her messy, beautiful life, lingered in her heart. What if she'd revealed too much? What if people saw her differently, judged her differently? The vulnerability didn't go away, even after the cameras did. Still, there was something freeing in having shared it all. Sarah had always told herself that strength meant handling everything alone. But maybe it also meant letting people see you when you're scared. Letting them witness your questions, your doubts, your humanity. She began dreaming about the trip with Jason. They had talked about it for weeks now, dropping pins on a map they hung up in their living room. Jason wanted mountains. Sarah wanted quiet. Somehow they agreed on Colorado. National parks, small towns, and space to think. When she told Linda about the plan, her friend smiled with the warmth only someone who'd seen the whole journey could give. "You've earned a pause," she said. "Let people take care of things while you go find your sky." So Sarah set the plan in motion. For the first time since the cafe opened, she was stepping away for more than a day. Linda and the staff took on extra responsibilities, and customers were surprisingly supportive. "You need this," one woman told her after ordering her usual coffee. "You've held all of us up. Now go let the world hold you for a change." The day they left, Jason was buzzing with excitement, his backpack stuffed with snacks, headphones, and a sketchpad. As Sarah drove them out of town, the landscape slowly shifted, trading suburban sidewalks for open stretches of highway and scattered wildflowers. They didn't rush. They stopped at roadside diners, took photos of sunrises, and sat in silence when the road got quiet. In that silence, Sarah started to feel pieces of herself returning, parts she hadn't realized she'd left behind in the whirlwind of responsibility. In the mountains, surrounded by the hum of pine trees and the echo of her son's laughter, Sarah let herself rest. Not just physically, but spiritually. One afternoon, they hiked to a high overlook where the sky seemed impossibly large. Jason stood at the edge, arms stretched wide. "It feels like the world is listening here," he said softly. Sarah sat beside him and nodded. "It is. Or maybe we're just finally quiet enough to hear it." In that moment, something clicked. The years of fighting, building, fixing, growing, they had shaped her, but they didn't define her entirety. She was more than the cafe. More than the story people had told about her. She was a woman who dared to ask, dared to grow, and now, dared to be still. That night, in a small cabin nestled in a forest clearing, Sarah journaled by candlelight while Jason drew a mountain scene from memory. Her words flowed without hesitation. I thought building something meant never slowing down. But maybe the real strength is in knowing when to step back, when to let your soul catch up with your steps. When they returned home, the cafe was still standing, thriving even. The staff had managed beautifully, and customers shared stories about how things had gone in her absence. Sarah smiled, not with relief but with pride. She had built something sustainable, not just in structure, but in spirit. Shortly after their return, the documentary aired. Sarah didn't watch it at first. She couldn't bring herself to. But the reaction was immediate. Messages poured in, strangers from across the country thanking her for being real, for showing them that resilience didn't mean being unbreakable, but being brave enough to heal. One woman wrote, "Your story made me walk out of a toxic job and open a bakery I've been dreaming about for years. Thank you for reminding me it's not too late." Sarah wept as she read those words. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that her story, imperfect, unfiltered, and full of doubts, had somehow become a mirror for others to see their own strength. Elon sent a simple message, "Now you see what I saw." This was never just about a tip. And it hit her then, this journey wasn't just about financial survival or chasing a dream. It was about becoming a person who lifted others while finding her own balance. It was about Jason seeing what love looks like in action. About a town being reminded of what community means. And about Sarah herself, learning to believe that she didn't have to carry it all alone. That sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to keep pushing forward, but to pause, breathe, and choose your next step with intention. After the documentary aired and the flood of messages came in, Sarah found herself caught in an unfamiliar current. For so long, she'd been pushing uphill, fighting for her cafe, for her family, for her place in a world that often overlooked women like her. Now, with the attention came something unexpected, recognition. Opportunities she'd never imagined began arriving in her inbox. Invitations to speak at conferences, collaborate with nonprofits, appear on podcasts. People wanted her voice, her perspective, her story. And for the first time, Sarah hesitated. It wasn't fear of public speaking or travel, it was something deeper, a quiet unease about what this new level of visibility might cost. She had worked so hard to find peace in the simple things, morning routines with Jason, the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls at the cafe, the familiar creak of the cafe's front door. She wasn't sure if she was ready to trade those things for hotel rooms, airplanes, and flashing lights. One night, she sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, the stars blinking above her like old friends. Jason had gone to bed early after a long day of school, and for the first time in a while, the house was quiet. She called her mother, something she hadn't done in a few days. Their conversations had grown easier since their reconciliation, less tense, more open. "They want me to go to New York next month," Sarah said after some small talk. "To speak on a panel about women entrepreneurs." Her mother didn't miss a beat. "And how do you feel about that?" Sarah exhaled slowly. "I'm not sure. Proud, I guess. But also tired. I don't want to lose what I've built here, what's real." There was a long pause, and then her mother said something Sarah hadn't expected, "Maybe you don't have to choose. Maybe there's a way to step forward without leaving anything behind." Sarah thought about that long after they hung up. It wasn't about saying yes to everything or retreating into comfort. It was about honoring what she valued while also allowing herself to grow. The next day, she drafted a list, not a to-do list, but a why list. Why she started. Why she kept going. Why it mattered. At the top was Jason. Then her community. Then her own need to prove to herself that she was capable of more. Reading it back, Sarah realized none of those reasons required her to become someone else. She didn't have to chase fame. She didn't have to build a franchise. She just had to stay honest, to herself and to the people who had walked with her from the beginning. So she said yes to New York, but on her terms. She brought Jason with her, turned it into a short trip, and asked that her appearance be part of a broader discussion that included real women from all walks of life. When they arrived, Sarah was struck by the scale of it all, the noise, the lights, the speed of everything. But she carried herself with quiet strength, wearing no mask, speaking from her heart. Her panel was raw, human, and honest. She talked about burnout, single motherhood, and how success sometimes looked like letting someone else take the lead for a day so you could breathe. The audience responded not with applause, but with silence, deep, emotional stillness. And then, thunderous applause. Afterward, women approached her, not just aspiring entrepreneurs, but teachers, nurses, stay-at-home moms. They didn't want business tips. They wanted connection. They wanted to thank her for making them feel seen. Jason watched from the sidelines, proud but thoughtful. Later that night, back in their hotel room, he said, "You're like a lighthouse, Mom." She blinked. "A lighthouse?" "Yeah," he said. "You don't go out chasing ships. You just stand there and shine." Sarah's throat tightened, and she pulled him into a hug. That single sentence stayed with her, long after the trip ended. When they returned home, the cafe was just as she left it, warm, buzzing, familiar. But Sarah was not the same. She was clearer now about what she wanted. She didn't need a stage to make an impact. She just needed to stay rooted in what mattered. Over the following weeks, she began shifting how she managed her time. She hired a part-time manager, started blocking out days for rest, reflection, and family. The cafe ran smoother than ever. She began hosting monthly storytelling nights, safe spaces where anyone could come and share something real. The first night, Sarah told her original story. The one about the day Elon Musk walked in, and she nervously asked for a $50 tip, never expecting anything to come from it. The crowd laughed, cried, and clapped not for the ending, but for the beginning. For the moment that someone dared to ask. Sarah realized something that night: her strength hadn't come from getting a yes. It came from having the courage to ask in the first place. And now, she lived her life in that same spirit. Asking herself what she needed. Asking others how she could help. Asking the world not for permission, but for purpose. Autumn crept in quietly, coloring the edges of the trees in gold and auburn, and with it came a deep sense of transition for Sarah. The cafe, now in its third year, had become a mainstay in town, not just for coffee or baked goods, but for comfort, familiarity, and a kind of unspoken hope. People came not just for what was served, but for what was felt. But even as everything around her settled into rhythm, Sarah found herself craving a different kind of growth, one that wasn't tied to expansion or profit, but to meaning. She began to reflect more often, journaling late at night, walking slowly through town with no destination in mind, just listening. It was during one of those walks that she passed the community center and saw a handwritten sign taped to the window: "Mentors Needed, Youth Leadership Program. Inquire within." She stopped in her tracks. Something about the words tugged at her. Later that week, she met with the program director, a kind-eyed woman named Trina, who explained that they paired local teens with adults who had overcome adversity, hoping to inspire resilience and character. Sarah didn't hesitate. She signed up on the spot. "I don't have all the answers," she said honestly. Trina smiled. "That's perfect. We're not looking for perfect, we're looking for real." Her mentee, a 16-year-old named Ava, reminded Sarah of herself at that age, guarded, quick-witted, trying too hard to seem like nothing could touch her. Their early meetings were quiet, mostly filled with awkward silences and side glances. But Sarah didn't push. She simply showed up, every time, just like she had for her customers and her son. And eventually, Ava began to speak, about the pressure she felt to succeed, her fear of failure, the weight of pretending to be okay when she wasn't. Sarah listened without judgment. She didn't try to fix everything. She just shared her own stories, of dropped plates, of near eviction, of days when she doubted if she could do one more shift. Slowly, a trust formed. Ava began coming to the cafe after school, sitting quietly in the corner with her laptop. Sometimes she'd talk to customers. Other times she'd just watch. One evening, as Sarah closed up, Ava asked, "Do you ever feel like you're meant for something more, but you don't even know what more is?" Sarah looked at her and nodded. "Every single day. But I've learned that more isn't always louder or bigger. Sometimes, it's just being exactly where you are and doing it with all your heart." The mentorship grew into a friendship, and watching Ava find her voice reminded Sarah why she'd started this journey in the first place. It wasn't to be known. It was to be useful. To be present. Meanwhile, the documentary continued making waves. A foundation reached out, offering to fund a community development grant in Sarah's name, if she was interested in starting something new. A second cafe, a non-profit, a training center, anything she envisioned. It was tempting. But Sarah took her time. She talked with Jason, her staff, her mother. She even asked Ava. The consensus was clear. Whatever she built next had to come from the same place her first venture had: need, heart, and honesty. So she began planning a new project, a mentorship and job readiness program for young people, based in the back room of her cafe. She called it The Next Cup. The idea was simple: each week, local teens and young adults could attend free workshops on entrepreneurship, customer service, budgeting, and emotional wellness. It wasn't about turning everyone into business owners, it was about giving them tools, perspective, and someone who believed in them. Word spread quickly, and within a month, the program had its first 15 attendees. Sarah watched them file in one evening, some excited, some skeptical, all of them carrying unseen stories. She stood at the front of the room, nervous but grounded. "I'm not here to teach you how to get rich," she said. "I'm here to remind you that you matter. That your story matters. And that no matter how impossible things feel right now, they can change. I know that, because mine did." The room was silent at first. Then, slowly, heads nodded. Phones were tucked away. Walls came down. After the session, Ava hugged her. "This is the more, isn't it?" Sarah smiled. "Yeah. I think it is." Jason, now more mature and thoughtful, volunteered to help with the tech setup and even offered to run a workshop on creative projects. Seeing him step into his own kind of leadership filled Sarah with a quiet pride that words couldn't touch. She'd once feared she wasn't enough for him. Now, she saw that everything she had built, every painful choice and exhausting day, had shaped him into someone kind, capable, and deeply aware of what matters. On the way home that night, he looked over and said, "You know, I used to think you were just tired all the time because you worked so much. But now I get it. You were building something invisible. And I can see it now." Sarah didn't say anything. She just squeezed his hand. That night, she wrote in her journal again. Not about goals or worries or questions. Just a single sentence: "I am finally living the life I didn't know I had the strength to dream." And she meant it. Life has a way of testing you when you feel most secure, and Sarah was about to learn that lesson anew. Just as The Next Cup program found its footing and the cafe hummed with a new energy, an unexpected storm rolled in. It started with a letter, a formal notice from the building's landlord. The rent was increasing significantly, effective in 60 days. The wording was polite but firm. No room for negotiation. Sarah read the letter 3 times before the reality sank in: the cafe, her sanctuary, might no longer be affordable. Panic clawed at her chest, a familiar shadow she thought she'd left behind. She called Linda immediately. "We have to talk," she said, voice tight but steady. Together, they pored over the finances late into the night. The rent hike would add thousands monthly, money they simply didn't have. Cutting costs was an option, but Sarah worried it would hurt staff or quality, neither of which she was willing to sacrifice. The thought of closing the doors she'd fought so hard to open was suffocating. But even in that moment of fear, she refused to let despair win. Instead, she leaned on her community. Sarah called a town hall meeting at the cafe, inviting customers, neighbors, and local business owners. She shared the situation honestly, without dramatics or self-pity. "This place isn't just mine," she said. "It's all of ours. And right now, it needs all of us." The response was immediate and overwhelming. People offered ideas, donations, volunteer help, everything from organizing fundraisers to reaching out to the landlord on her behalf. An online campaign launched, gaining traction beyond the town's borders. Sarah was moved to tears. This wasn't just support, it was proof that the connections she'd built were real. But not everyone was on board. A local developer expressed interest in the building, proposing a new commercial project that would push out small businesses like hers. The town was divided, the cafe's future suddenly tangled in a larger debate about growth, progress, and community values. Sarah found herself at meetings, speaking publicly, advocating not just for her cafe but for the heart of the town. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, but also a renewed sense of purpose. In the chaos, Ava stood by her side, no longer the quiet teenager she once was. She organized youth volunteers, led social media outreach, and spoke passionately at rallies. Sarah watched her with awe. This young woman who had once been so guarded was now a force of nature. It reminded Sarah why the mentorship mattered so much. The fight became about more than rent, it became about preserving a place where people could belong, where stories could be told, where hope could be nurtured. After weeks of uncertainty, a breakthrough came. The landlord agreed to freeze the rent increase for a year, contingent on the cafe participating in a community revitalization plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was a lifeline. Sarah and Linda celebrated quietly, exhausted but grateful. The experience left Sarah changed. She realized that growth wasn't linear, that setbacks were part of any journey worth taking. And that sometimes, strength came not from standing alone but from standing together. The cafe reopened the next morning with a renewed spirit. Customers who had rallied around the cause poured in, their faces bright with encouragement and pride. Sarah took a deep breath as she looked around, the aroma of fresh coffee mingling with the buzz of conversation. She felt a fierce protectiveness for this place, but also a deep gratitude. She understood now more than ever that success wasn't just about survival. It was about the people you touched, the lives you lifted, the community you helped build. In the weeks that followed, Sarah balanced the demands of running the cafe, growing the next cup, and navigating town politics. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when exhaustion threatened to pull her under. But she held fast to the lessons she'd learned, the power of asking, of leaning on others, of staying true to her heart. One evening, after a long day, she found herself alone in the cafe, the last customer gone and the lights dimmed. She sat at a table near the window, journal open, pen in hand. She wrote, "Today was hard. But I am harder. Because this is my home, and I am not alone." Outside, the stars shone steadily, quiet witnesses to a woman who had dared to ask, dared to hope, and dared to keep going. And as Sarah closed her journal, she smiled, because she knew this was only the beginning. The unexpected victory over the rent increase gave Sarah a moment to breathe, but life rarely offers long reprieves. Just as the cafe's rhythm settled back into a hopeful cadence, another challenge surfaced, this one closer to home, more personal, and just as demanding. Jason, now 17, was preparing to graduate high school, and with that milestone came an avalanche of questions and pressures, college applications, scholarship essays, and decisions about his future. Sarah wanted to support him fully but felt the weight of her own exhaustion creeping in. One evening, they sat at the kitchen table, scattered with papers and laptops, Jason's brow furrowed with frustration. "Mom, I don't even know what I want to do," he admitted, voice low but honest. Sarah reached across and squeezed his hand. "That's okay. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Life's about exploring, trying things, and sometimes failing. What matters is that you keep asking." Jason nodded but looked unconvinced. The pressure of expectations, his own and others, was a heavy burden for a teenager who had seen his mom carry more than her share. To lighten the load, Sarah encouraged Jason to take a gap year, a concept she'd never considered before but realized might be exactly what he needed, time to find his path without the weight of immediate decisions. Meanwhile, the Next Cup program blossomed, drawing more participants each week. Sarah found herself mentoring not just Ava but a growing group of young people hungry for guidance, connection, and hope. Their stories intertwined with hers, creating a tapestry of struggle and resilience that fueled her commitment. One afternoon, Ava confided she was applying for a scholarship but feared rejection. Sarah pulled her close. "Remember, Ava, the bravest thing is to try. The outcome doesn't define you." The cafe became a sanctuary for these young souls, a place where vulnerability was strength, and dreams were nurtured with gentle hands. Yet, amid this growth, Sarah felt a stirring in herself, a desire to push her own boundaries. She began to explore writing, jotting down reflections and stories from her journey. An editor at a local magazine approached her after hearing about the documentary, inviting her to write a monthly column. Sarah hesitated but then embraced the opportunity. Writing offered a new outlet, a way to reach people beyond the walls of the cafe and the town. Her words resonated, sometimes raw and unfiltered, other times filled with quiet wisdom. Readers responded with letters and comments, sharing their own struggles and triumphs. It was a reminder that vulnerability could bridge distances, that stories, her story, held power. At home, Jason grew more independent but still leaned on his mother's steady presence. They took weekend hikes, talked late into the night about everything from space exploration to music, building a friendship rooted in trust and honesty. Sarah marveled at the young man he was becoming, thoughtful, kind, and fiercely loyal. One evening, after a long day, Sarah sat on the porch with her mother. The years of tension between them had softened into something warm and supportive. "You've come so far," her mother said quietly. "I'm proud of you." Sarah smiled, the gratitude in her heart nearly overwhelming. "I couldn't have done it without you." "We both had to learn," her mother replied. "Life's not about perfection. It's about trying, forgiving, and growing." As winter approached, Sarah reflected on the past years, on the chance encounter with Elon Musk, the struggles and breakthroughs, the community that had become her family. She realized that every twist and turn had led her here, to a place of strength tempered by compassion. One snowy evening, she closed her eyes and whispered a thank you, to the universe, to fate, to the quiet courage inside her. Because no matter what the future held, she knew she would face it with open arms and an open heart. Spring arrived with a burst of color and possibility, and Sarah felt a renewed energy pulsing through her days. The cafe buzzed louder than ever, a lively hub where laughter mingled with the rich aroma of coffee. The Next Cup was thriving, and Sarah's monthly column had gained a steady readership. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet tension simmered. The grant money that had supported the mentorship program was set to expire in 3 months, and Sarah knew she would have to find new funding or face scaling back the work she loved so dearly. She pored over budgets and grant applications late into the night, often waking before dawn to write or revise proposals. The strain was beginning to show, not just in her own exhaustion but in the subtle shifts she noticed around her. Ava, who had blossomed into a confident leader, was suddenly quieter, distracted. Jason, now deep into his gap year, had started working part-time but seemed restless, eager to find his place in the world. One afternoon, Sarah sat with Ava in the cafe's back room, their usual workshop space. Ava's voice was hesitant as she shared that her mother was ill, and the weight of caring for family was pulling her in multiple directions. Sarah reached across the table and took her hand. You're doing everything you can. Remember to take care of yourself, too. Ava nodded, eyes shimmering with gratitude and unshed tears. Around the same time, Sarah received a call from the magazine editor, a new opportunity to expand her column into a podcast. It was exciting but daunting. The thought of speaking publicly again after years away from the spotlight stirred old anxieties. Still, Sarah accepted, seeing it as another way to connect with people beyond the cafe walls. Recording the first episodes was nerve-wracking. She stumbled over words, questioned her voice, and battled the impulse to give up. But with each episode, she grew more comfortable, more authentic. Listeners began sending messages, sharing how her stories inspired them to face their own challenges. One message stood out, a woman named Karen, who had struggled with addiction and found hope through Sarah's words. Sarah's heart swelled with the profound impact of her journey. Yet, just as momentum built, a shadow appeared. Late one evening, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Jason's school counselor. Jason had been involved in a minor accident at work and was being treated at the hospital. The news hit like a thunderclap. Sarah rushed to the hospital, her mind swirling with fear and guilt. When she arrived, Jason was awake, bruised but stable. He managed a weak smile. "I'm okay, Mom." Relief washed over her in waves, but the incident opened a new chapter of concern: how to support Jason's independence while keeping him safe. The next days were a blur of doctor visits, insurance calls, and sleepless nights. Sarah juggled it all, leaning on Linda and Ava for help. The cafe staff rallied, covering shifts and sending encouraging messages. It was a reminder that she was never truly alone. As spring deepened, Sarah found herself reflecting on the delicate balance between giving and receiving, strength and vulnerability. The journey had taught her that asking for help was not weakness, but a powerful act of trust. With renewed clarity, she crafted a proposal for a community partnership to sustain the next cup. She reached out to local businesses, nonprofits, and the school district, weaving together a coalition committed to youth empowerment. The response was heartening: doors opened, resources flowed, and the program's future looked brighter. One evening, as Sarah closed up the cafe, Jason joined her on the porch. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. "Thanks for always believing in me, Mom," he said quietly. Sarah smiled, feeling a deep well of love and pride. "Always. And I'll keep believing until you believe it yourself." The seasons continued to turn, bringing new challenges and triumphs. Sarah knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she was ready. With every cup served, every story told, and every life touched, she was building more than a business, she was building a legacy of resilience, hope, and unshakable heart. The early days of summer brought warmth and light, but also the undeniable pressure of choices looming on the horizon. Jason had started applying to colleges, and Sarah watched him wrestle with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The gap year that once seemed like freedom was now a crossroads filled with daunting decisions. One afternoon, while sorting orders in the cafe's kitchen, Sarah caught herself watching Jason as he talked on the phone with a college advisor. His voice was filled with hope but also the unmistakable tremor of doubt. She stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Whatever you choose, it'll be right for you. Not for anyone else, but for you." Jason nodded, eyes meeting hers. "I know, Mom. But it's scary." She squeezed his shoulder. "That's okay. Scary means you're growing." Meanwhile, the next cup continued to expand. Ava had taken on a leadership role, organizing workshops and recruiting new mentors. Sarah felt a mix of pride and wistfulness. This young woman who had once struggled to trust was now guiding others through the same journey. But growth always came with growing pains. One afternoon, a disagreement arose between two program participants, threatening to unravel the safe space Sarah had worked so hard to create. The argument was heated, fueled by misunderstandings and personal frustrations. Sarah intervened with calm authority, reminding everyone that respect was the foundation of their community. She spent the following days meeting individually with those involved, listening deeply, and facilitating reconciliation. The experience was exhausting but reaffirmed her belief in the power of empathy and communication. Around the same time, the podcast gained unexpected attention. A popular online influencer shared one of Sarah's episodes, sparking a surge of listeners from across the country. Emails poured in, stories of hardship, resilience, and gratitude. Sarah was overwhelmed but inspired. The reach of her voice was growing beyond the small town she loved. But success brought new challenges. Sarah found herself torn between the demands of the cafe, the mentorship program, the podcast, and her role as a mother. She questioned if she was spreading herself too thin. One evening, after a particularly long day, she sat alone in the quiet cafe, the scent of coffee comforting but the silence heavy. She opened her journal and wrote, "Am I losing myself in trying to be everything to everyone?" The question lingered. The answer came gradually. Sarah realized she needed to delegate, to trust others and create space for herself. She began training trusted staff to take on more responsibilities and leaned on Linda and Ava for leadership in the mentorship program. This shift wasn't easy. Sarah was used to carrying the weight alone. But slowly, she learned that sharing the load made her stronger, not weaker. Jason noticed the change too. One morning, as they walked to the park, he said, "Mom, you seem lighter. Like you're finally breathing." Sarah laughed softly. "I am. And it feels good." The relationship between mother and son deepened, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. Sarah found herself more present, savoring moments rather than rushing through them. As summer unfolded, the cafe hosted a community festival, music, food, and workshops, celebrating the very spirit that had carried them through challenges. Sarah stood at the center of it all, watching families, friends, and strangers come together. It was a testament to what could happen when people chose connection over division. One quiet moment, Ava approached her, holding a letter. "I got accepted to college," she said, eyes shining. "I wanted you to know first." Sarah pulled her into a hug, pride swelling in her chest. "You earned it, Ava. This is just the beginning." As the sun set on the festival, Sarah reflected on how far they had come, not just the cafe or the program, but the personal transformations beneath the surface. The woman who had once asked Elon Musk for a simple tip had grown into a beacon of hope, resilience, and community. The journey was far from over, but Sarah was ready for whatever came next, with courage, grace, and an open heart. The success of the community festival left Sarah feeling both exhilarated and contemplative. For the first time in months, she had a moment to breathe and reflect on the impact the next cup had made. The cafe wasn't just a business, it was a lifeline, a hub for dreams and healing. But Sarah knew that sustaining this momentum required more than passion, it demanded strategy and partnerships. With that in mind, she began reaching out beyond her town, connecting with nonprofits and entrepreneurs in nearby cities. She wanted to scale the mentorship program, to bring hope to even more young people who felt lost or overlooked. One call led to another, and soon she was invited to speak at a regional conference on community development. The invitation thrilled her but also stirred old nerves. Standing before a crowd of strangers, sharing her story, felt like stepping into the spotlight all over again. Yet, Sarah embraced the challenge. She spoke with honesty about her failures and successes, the fear of asking for help, and the unexpected power of vulnerability. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom approached her afterward to share their own stories or explore collaboration. Back home, Jason was gearing up for college applications in earnest, and Sarah did her best to be his anchor amid the chaos of forms, deadlines, and essays. Their late-night talks became a ritual, a safe space where fears and hopes mingled freely. One night, Jason admitted his uncertainty about the future, confessing he felt torn between chasing his dreams and staying close to family. Sarah listened without judgment, reminding him that his path didn't have to be linear or perfect. "Life's messy," she said gently. "What matters is that you keep moving forward." Meanwhile, the podcast grew in popularity, attracting a diverse audience eager for stories of resilience and connection. Sarah began featuring guests, young people from The Next Cup, local leaders, and even a few surprise figures from her past. The process pushed her outside her comfort zone but also enriched her understanding of the power of shared stories. Then came an unexpected opportunity. A well-known publishing house reached out, interested in turning her columns and podcast episodes into a book. The prospect thrilled Sarah but also terrified her. Writing was personal, vulnerable, and deeply tied to her identity. Could she bear her soul on such a public scale? After much deliberation, she agreed. The project became a new focus, requiring long hours of writing and editing, often after the cafe had closed. It was exhausting but deeply fulfilling. Through the process, Sarah uncovered layers of her own story she hadn't fully acknowledged, the fears, the failures, and the moments of quiet strength. At the same time, a familiar tension began to surface in the cafe. A new coffee chain had opened nearby, flashy and impersonal, threatening to siphon off customers. Sarah worried about the impact on her business but refused to be intimidated. Instead, she doubled down on what made The Next Cup unique: the warmth, the community, the stories shared over steaming mugs. She organized special events, featured local artists, and encouraged customers to bring friends. Slowly, the cafe's loyal following remained strong, a testament to the connections Sarah had nurtured. Amid the whirlwind, Sarah also grappled with lingering insecurities. Doubts whispered that she wasn't enough, that her successes were fragile or accidental. But each time those thoughts surfaced, she reminded herself of the journey, of the young waitress who had dared to ask, who had faced rejection and loss but kept moving forward. One evening, as she closed the cafe, Sarah sat down with her journal and wrote, "I am more than my fears. I am the sum of my courage." The words felt like a promise to herself. The chapter closed with Sarah standing at the crossroads, balancing growth and self-care, ambition and authenticity, fear and hope. She was no longer the uncertain woman who had asked Elon Musk for a tip but a leader with a vision rooted in heart and community. The future was unwritten, but Sarah was ready to write it with resilience, grace, and unwavering faith in the power of connection. The months following the book deal announcement were a whirlwind. Sarah found herself juggling the demands of writing, managing The Next Cup, and supporting Jason as he prepared for college. The pressure at times felt overwhelming, but Sarah leaned into the strength she had cultivated over the years. She established a routine, carving out early mornings for writing and evenings for the cafe. The rest of the day was filled with meetings, mentoring sessions, and the never-ending flow of daily life. One afternoon, a surprise visitor arrived at the cafe, a woman named Grace, who introduced herself as a former mentor from years ago. Grace's presence was a powerful reminder of the ripple effects of Sarah's work. She had gone on to start her own nonprofit and credited Sarah's mentorship as the spark that changed her trajectory. Their reunion was filled with laughter, tears, and stories of challenges overcome. It reinforced Sarah's belief that small acts of kindness and belief could ignite profound change. Meanwhile, Jason's college applications became a source of both hope and tension. The young man who once felt lost was now poised to step into a new world, but the uncertainty weighed heavily on both their hearts. One evening, as they sat on the porch swing, Jason voiced his fears. "What if I fail, Mom? What if I can't live up to everyone's expectations?" Sarah wrapped her arms around him. "You don't have to be perfect, Jason. Your worth isn't tied to success or failure. It's who you are, the kindness you show, the courage you have to keep trying." The words seemed to settle something deep inside him. On the writing front, Sarah grappled with vulnerability. Sharing her story on such a public platform was both freeing and frightening. The editing process peeled back layers of emotion, sometimes bringing tears, sometimes laughter. She found unexpected strength in the feedback from early readers, many of whom related deeply to her experiences. Yet, amid these victories, challenges persisted. The cafe faced staffing shortages during the busy summer months, forcing Sarah to cover shifts and stretch herself thinner than ever. Financial strains occasionally resurfaced, reminding her of the precariousness underlying even the most hopeful moments. One particularly difficult day, exhaustion caught up with her. After a long shift, she sat alone in the dim cafe, the hum of the city outside contrasting with the stillness inside. Tears came unbidden as she acknowledged her limits. But in that vulnerability, she found a quiet resolve. She texted Linda and Ava, asking for help to reorganize the schedule and share responsibilities more evenly. The willingness of her team to step up was a balm to her weary spirit. The podcast also took a new turn. Sarah invited guests to share not just stories of resilience but of failure and imperfection. The episode struck a chord, sparking conversations about mental health, self-compassion, and the messy reality of growth. Sarah's own honesty about her struggles added depth and authenticity to the series. One evening, after recording a particularly emotional episode, Sarah received a message from Elon Musk himself. It was brief but encouraging, a simple note acknowledging her courage and impact. The message stirred a mix of surprise and gratitude, a full-circle moment from the woman who had once nervously asked him for a tip. As autumn settled in, Jason received his college acceptance letter. The moment was bittersweet, joy mingled with the ache of impending separation. Sarah felt proud but also protective, wanting to hold on yet knowing he needed to soar. The family gathered for a small celebration, laughter and tears blending in the warm glow of the kitchen. Reflecting on the years of struggle and triumph, Sarah realized that every step, every challenge, every victory had shaped not just her path but those of countless others. Her story was no longer just her own, it was a shared journey of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love. As she closed her journal one crisp autumn night, Sarah wrote, "The future is uncertain, but I face it with an open heart and unwavering faith. This is only the beginning." The arrival of fall brought a subtle shift in the air and in Sarah's life. Jason was preparing to leave for college, the house already feeling emptier despite the remaining days before his departure. Sarah found herself oscillating between pride and a quiet ache. The woman who had fought so hard to keep her family together now faced the bittersweet reality of watching her son take flight. Amid the swirl of packing, orientation schedules, and last-minute errands, Sarah made a conscious decision to cherish every moment. She planned simple rituals, morning coffee on the porch, evening walks through the neighborhood, and late-night talks about hopes and fears. These moments grounded her in the present, even as the future loomed uncertain. Meanwhile, the Next Cup was entering a new phase. The mentorship program had grown steadily, and Sarah was exploring ways to expand its reach online. Virtual workshops and webinars allowed them to connect with young people beyond their town, broadening the community in unexpected ways. Ava took on more responsibilities, stepping confidently into a leadership role that both inspired and relieved Sarah. The podcast episodes now featured stories from across the country, voices diverse in background yet united in resilience. However, the transition wasn't without its hurdles. Managing remote connections required new skills, and Sarah faced the challenge of maintaining the intimate, supportive atmosphere that had defined the program in person. Technical glitches and time zone differences tested her patience, but each obstacle was met with determination and creativity. On a personal front, Sarah grappled with the silence left by Jason's absence. The house, once filled with his laughter and footsteps, echoed with memories. Loneliness crept in during the quiet hours, threatening to unravel the steady progress she had made. To combat this, Sarah reached out to old friends and made new connections, attending local events and joining community groups. These efforts rekindled a sense of belonging and reminded her that life's chapters often included unexpected detours and new beginnings. One chilly evening, Sarah hosted a small gathering at the cafe, a celebration of the mentorship program's anniversary. The room buzzed with energy as past and present participants shared stories, laughter, and plans for the future. Sarah watched with pride as Ava spoke eloquently about her vision for the next phase, her confidence a testament to the power of opportunity and support. The event also marked a turning point for Sarah personally. She realized that while her role as mother was evolving, her purpose as a mentor and community leader was deepening. The two identities intertwined, each enriching the other. Around this time, Sarah received an invitation to speak at a national conference on youth empowerment. The opportunity was thrilling but stirred old anxieties about public speaking and self-doubt. Yet, remembering the growth she had experienced over the years, she accepted. Preparing for the conference became a journey of reflection and affirmation. Sarah crafted her speech to highlight not only her own story but the collective strength of those she served. When the day arrived, she stepped onto the stage with a steady heart, sharing tales of struggle, resilience, and hope. The standing ovation that followed was more than applause, it was a recognition of a journey shared by many. Returning home, Sarah felt invigorated but aware of the work still ahead. The book was nearing completion, the podcast continued to grow, and the cafe remained a vital anchor in the community. She understood that balance was a constant pursuit, a dance between ambition and self-care, connection and solitude. One afternoon, as she walked through the quiet cafe, Sarah paused to take in the familiar sights, the worn wooden tables, the framed photographs of smiling faces, the soft hum of conversation. It was more than a place to serve coffee, it was a sanctuary, a testament to the power of resilience and the human spirit. In the stillness, Sarah made a vow to herself, to embrace change with grace, to lead with compassion, and to nurture the seeds of hope wherever they might take root. The journey was far from over, but Sarah faced the future with open arms and an unbreakable spirit. Winter crept quietly into town, bringing with it long nights and a reflective stillness that contrasted sharply with the warmth and energy Sarah had cultivated in her world. The cafe's windows fogged with steam and the scent of fresh coffee filled the air, but beneath the surface, Sarah felt a tension she couldn't shake. Jason was now settled into college, his calls less frequent but full of updates about classes, friends, and the inevitable homesickness. Sarah missed him fiercely but knew this was the natural rhythm of life, a bittersweet dance of letting go and holding on. The next cup continued to thrive, yet the expansion brought fresh challenges. Managing a growing mentorship network stretched Sarah thin. The joy of watching young people flourish was often shadowed by the exhaustion of administrative demands and the occasional clash of personalities within the team. One particularly cold afternoon, Sarah found herself sitting alone in the quiet cafe after closing, the weight of responsibility pressing down. Doubts whispered that she might be overreaching, that the dream she had nurtured was becoming unmanageable. But then Ava appeared, carrying a stack of papers and a determined smile. "Let me help," she said simply. "We're in this together." That moment crystallized a new understanding for Sarah. Leadership was not about doing everything alone but about building a community of trust and shared purpose. Together, they worked to restructure the program, delegate tasks, and create sustainable systems. This shift brought relief and renewed energy. Around the same time, Sarah faced an unexpected setback. A local funding source that had supported The Next Cup for years announced it would be cutting grants due to budget constraints. The news was a blow, threatening the stability of the program just as it was poised for growth. Sarah grappled with the fear of losing the momentum they had built. She called an emergency meeting with her core team, brainstorming ideas to bridge the gap. They launched a crowdfunding campaign, reaching out to their extended community with honest stories and heartfelt pleas. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from strangers and friends alike, proof that Sarah's vision resonated far beyond the town's borders. This experience deepened her faith in the power of connection and the generosity of the human spirit. Meanwhile, Sarah's book neared publication, the culmination of years of writing, revising, and soul-searching. The publisher scheduled a launch event at a bookstore in a nearby city, an opportunity both exciting and nerve-wracking. Sarah spent weeks preparing, balancing the thrill of sharing her story with the anxiety of public scrutiny. The day of the launch arrived, and the bookstore buzzed with anticipation. Friends, family, and supporters filled the seats as Sarah took the stage, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. She read passages that revealed the heart of her journey, the struggles, the hope, and the relentless pursuit of meaning. The audience responded with warmth and applause, affirming that her story had touched many. Afterward, Sarah mingled with attendees, hearing their stories and finding new inspiration. The event reminded her that vulnerability could build bridges and that sharing her truth was a gift, not a risk. In her personal life, Sarah continued to nurture her relationship with Jason. Though miles apart, their bond remained strong through regular calls and messages. She encouraged him to pursue passions and embrace the uncertainty of his path. One call in particular stood out, a moment when Jason confided about a difficult decision regarding his major. Sarah listened carefully, offering guidance but ultimately reminding him that his choices were his own to make. The trust between them deepened, a testament to the foundation they had built. As winter gave way to early spring, Sarah reflected on the cyclical nature of life, the endings and beginnings that defined her journey. The woman who once hesitated to ask for a simple tip had transformed into a leader who inspired others to find their voice. Her story was no longer just about survival but about thriving through connection, courage, and compassion. She understood that challenges would always arise, but so would opportunities to grow. The chapter closed with Sarah standing by the cafe window, watching the first blossoms of spring unfold. She felt a quiet hope stirring within her, a readiness to embrace whatever the next chapter might bring with an open heart and unwavering spirit. Spring had blossomed fully now, the town waking from its winter slumber into vibrant life, and Sarah felt the energy coursing through her veins. The cafe, ever a beacon in the neighborhood, buzzed with renewed activity, customers returning with warmer smiles, sunlight streaming through the windows, casting golden hues on familiar faces. Yet beneath this lively exterior, Sarah was wrestling with an internal crossroads. The success of The Next Cup and her growing platform brought opportunities she hadn't imagined, but also difficult decisions about what to prioritize and how to stay true to her original vision. The pressure of balancing public expectations, personal ambitions, and the needs of her community pressed on her, sometimes painfully. One morning, after a restless night, Sarah found herself sitting alone on the cafe's back porch, the early light painting the sky in soft pastels. She thought of how far she had come, from a waitress nervously asking Elon Musk for a $50 tip to a woman whose story was inspiring thousands. But she also acknowledged the fatigue simmering beneath her resilience. In that quiet moment, Sarah realized she needed to reclaim space for herself, not just as a leader or a mother, but as a woman with dreams, fears, and a need for rest. With this newfound clarity, she set boundaries. Limiting her hours at the cafe, delegating more to Ava and Linda, and carving out time for creative pursuits and self-care. This shift was met with some resistance, change often is, but it was necessary. Around the same time, an unexpected invitation arrived. A documentary filmmaker wanted to profile Sarah's journey for a national series on unsung heroes. The prospect thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. Sharing her life on camera meant opening wounds and exposing vulnerabilities she had only recently begun to heal. After thoughtful consideration, Sarah agreed, viewing the project as an opportunity to amplify the voices of those she served. Filming was intense and intimate, peeling back layers of her story in ways she hadn't anticipated. But through the process, Sarah found strength in honesty and the healing power of storytelling. The documentary also brought new connections and opportunities. Sarah was invited to participate in panels, workshops, and community forums, expanding her reach and impact. Yet, amid these external achievements, she never lost sight of what truly mattered, the daily moments in the cafe where lives intersected, where hope was shared over coffee, and where she witnessed the quiet, transformative power of human connection. One afternoon, a familiar face walked through the door, Elon Musk. His arrival was unexpected and stirring. He greeted Sarah warmly, recalling their first encounter with a mix of humor and respect. Their conversation touched on dreams, challenges, and the surprising turns life takes. Elon's presence was a reminder of the unpredictable nature of journeys and the importance of seizing moments. As the seasons shifted, so did Sarah's perspective. She began to see her story not as a series of isolated events but as a tapestry woven with threads of courage, love, sacrifice, and hope. The lessons she had learned, the value of vulnerability, the strength in asking for help, the power of community, became guiding lights. In the quiet of the evening, Sarah often reflected on her path. She wrote in her journal, "Life is not a straight road but a winding trail. Each step, no matter how small, leads us to who we are meant to become." The chapter closed with Sarah standing at the cafe's entrance, watching the sun set in brilliant oranges and purples. She felt a deep peace, knowing that while the future was uncertain, she had the resilience and heart to face it head-on. The spring days stretched longer now, and with them came a profound sense of completion and new beginnings. Sarah stood behind the counter of The Next Cup, watching the familiar flow of customers. Faces both new and old, each carrying their own stories, their own struggles and hopes. The cafe had grown into more than a business, it was a sanctuary, a hub for connection, and a testament to resilience. As she wiped down the tables, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the days filled with uncertainty and doubt, the moments of fear and loneliness, the unexpected kindnesses and fierce determination that had shaped her path. Jason was home for the summer, his presence filling the house with youthful energy and the promise of the future. Their conversations now held a new depth, a mutual respect born of shared challenges and growth. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Jason turned to her and said, "Mom, your story has given me the courage to face my own." Sarah smiled, feeling the full circle of their journey. The book had been published, receiving praise for its honesty and heart. The documentary aired nationally, sparking conversations and inspiring countless viewers. Sarah's voice had become a beacon, not just for herself but for the many who saw their own struggles reflected in her story. Yet, amid the recognition and success, Sarah remained grounded in the lessons learned along the way. She understood that true strength came not from fame or fortune but from the connections forged in moments of vulnerability and courage. The mentorship program continued to thrive, with Ava and Linda stepping into leadership roles that promised the program's longevity. Sarah found joy in watching others carry the torch, knowing that her legacy was woven into their successes. One afternoon, as Sarah prepared to close the cafe, she found a note slipped under the door. It was from a young woman who had attended one of the mentorship workshops, thanking Sarah for believing in her when she had felt invisible and lost. The note ended simply, "You changed my life." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she folded the paper, a quiet affirmation of why she had fought so hard. In the days that followed, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. The hardships had not disappeared, but they had been transformed into stepping stones, each one leading her closer to herself and to a greater purpose. The final pages of her journal, written on a warm summer morning, captured this truth: life is full of surprises, but love will always lead the way. Our stories, messy, painful, beautiful, are what connect us and remind us that we are never truly alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the cafe, Sarah closed the door behind her and stepped into the night with an open heart and unwavering hope. The journey was far from over, but she was ready to meet whatever came next with courage, compassion, and love. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?